I have got a great panel of speakers with me today. We're all small business owners here in the Fort Worth area, and we are excited to share some stories with you about how we use our revenue, how we make our revenue, what we think of revenue, and some of the successes and challenges we've had, even with paying too close attention to revenue and not necessarily making decisions based on our values. There's just so many stories that we can share. And for each of the questions that I'm going to be asking, we could probably talk an hour on each one, but we've only got an hour today. And we have a lot of different perspectives to share. So I'll go ahead and get started with the first one. And that is, why did y'all choose to say yes and join us for this session? So I'll start with Vanessa on this one, and then we'll go to Sanger and EJ.
Great question. I don't know. No. Because it is taboo, especially in my position when you're a startup and you are raising money from investors and all they want to see is up, 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 fast, 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 fast. And when you're trying to build a long-term sustainable company that pays living wages and fair wages in multiple countries across the globe, the hockey stick growth isn't necessarily what we think is the goal. Nevertheless, it's important to show success, right? It's important to show quarter on quarter, we're growing. We are growing, we're gaining momentum. All of our numbers are increasing. Our number of customers are increasing. Our number of repeat customers are increasing. Our revenue is increasing. Our costs are decreasing, right? Like you have to show those things while simultaneously maintaining a strong focus on your vision and on your mission and not compromising on your values. And that's hard to do. So I answered the call to this panel, Cheryl, first of all, because you asked me and I do anything you tell me to do. And second of all, because I think it's really, really important for us to share openly and honestly as business owners about these topics that we all struggle with. And on social media, we make it look like everything is fine and dandy, but behind the curtain, it is often a different story. And I think we have to share these things with each other as wisdom and as encouragement.
Well, I would echo, Vanessa, what you said, that anything Cheryl asked me to do, I think I'm going to sign up for that. More deeply, why did I choose to be here today? Because I saw the title and I go, well, money's not taboo to me. I talk about money every day. I joke about meeting with clients as a financial advisor. Sorry, sometimes I'm a little bit too straightforward. It's like when you go to the doctor, you say, hey, I got a rash. And he goes, okay, drop your pants. All right, hey man, it's a little much, right? Oh, well, that's a business that I'm in. So I get used to it. I notice that for people that we don't talk about it every day, money is uncomfortable. A lot of that, in my opinion, goes back to how we were raised. I was raised by a financial advisor, so I can't even imagine a world where I didn't talk about money. But a lot of people weren't. A lot of people were raised in families where you did not talk about money. Well, it's no surprise that those people grow up to be adults who don't want to talk about money. And I think that in some small way, one of the reasons why I like doing what I do is because I recognize the benefit, the blessing that I received by having parents who talk to me about money, by having that exposure at a young age. And if I can make it a little bit easier for other people, then hey, I think I'm doing some sort of good in the world.
Ditto everyone said about we'll say yes to anything Cheryl says. And then for me, I'm very proud of revenue in the sense of, we're 100% bootstrapped and we're 10 full-time, 200 part-time. And, revenue to me is the way most of us will start a company is, we started our company going to schools with a pitch deck and getting pre-sales and showing schools a vision of what we believe we can do. And I think a lot of people who don't have discretionary income, to be in the top 10% of wealth. And in a white family, it's $1.7 million. For Black families, it's $380,000. Any stat I shared with Cheryl so she could follow up with. Those things are different when, you now don't have maybe a parent to write a loan or to help put their name on something. So pre-sale to me is such a strategy, especially in the impact space. And I think it's also important to highlight revenue and celebrate tech companies or social organizations that are that are doing innovative things on revenue, especially as you just saw. I mean, even like today, Rivian on the stock market being the highest IPO. And I think we might all have more revenue than they do currently right now. But, so you talk about value, then you see these things, and that where I think it's a lot of people lost. How does Netflix lose $70 billion and still be operating? And that's just not the case for a lot of us. So revenue is our vehicle.
Thank you. Yes. And that's why I think it's such an important topic. And I've gathered this panel because we are all at different stages in our business and we all come from different types of businesses. I purchased Cause Labs when it was already, over 10 years old. And I had been in the company for 10 years myself, sitting in many different seats. But then all of a sudden I was the business owner. So I wasn't just the CEO working for somebody else. Now I had to be like intimately familiar with the finances and how we were spending those and what are the operational costs really. And I was getting metrics that I had never known that I needed to track. And so, my next question for each of you, because we all come from different places. Some of us are in established businesses that we started ourselves, like you, EJ, and some of us are, fairly new and our business hasn't been open that long. And some of us have, purchased a business like myself. So, how well do you know your financials and what does that, sort of mean in your business for you to be like intimately or not so intimately familiar with the financials? And actually, Sanger, I'm going to start with you because I have a bit of an inkling of your answer on this one.
Yeah, well, I think that as a business owner, it's irresponsible to not be familiar with your finances, right? So I can't imagine that anybody, either any of the four of us or anybody who's listening would say, I'm not familiar. For me, I'm fortunate enough to have business partners, so I don't have to be in the weeds every single day on that. As a solo entrepreneur, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But what I've noticed for myself is that can be a distraction for me to get into the weeds of the numbers, to get into the weeds of the dollars and cents, right? My business does not exist purely to make money no more than we exist as humans to breathe, right? We have to make money. If we don't make money, it's not going to end well. If I don't breathe, I'm going to die. That's not why I'm living. That's not why this business exists. So I noticed for myself, I get kind of into the numbers. It becomes just like getting stuck in the mud, right? I'm not focusing on the value. I'm not focusing on the impact. That's not to say that it doesn't matter, right? But, we used to have in our company, like, for example, this year we're going to hit a revenue target that we've been chasing down for a while, right? We're going to hit 6 million. And it always felt like this big deal. Like, I'm going to feel so good when we hit 6 million. Now that it's here, it's like, what is it? What have we really done to increase our impact? And I don't think that measures it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing more about the impact. I think for us, and it's a contradiction, right? Because I have come from a space where I was kind of the turnaround CEO when I was asked to be the CEO. And so I was in the financials daily. I was trying to cut our expenses as much as I could. I was trying to just get the company stable. And then, the company became a little bit more stable and I was a little bit more comfortable with it, but I was still in the financials daily. And when I bought the company, I thought I still need to be in the financials daily and like mired in this, but you're right. You start just making decisions differently when you're in that all the time. I only look at the financials once a month now, really, when our bookkeeper is reviewing them with me. And it's more a review of like, are the books clean? Is this right? Is the bookkeeper doing a great job? I love my bookkeeper, by the way, if y'all want a reference. And, I have great CPA. I've got great advisors that I trust. I had a fractional CFO that worked with us for a year. It's really helped me get in a better headspace about looking at my financials. So I would love to hear from EJ, because you are bootstrapped. What has that been like for you?
Very, very hard. I mean, Yeah, we've been doing this for 10 years and we're still relative. I mean, like, so we started this with an idea with a college friend, two other people. And for us, I think, for me, there's three types of CEOs, and some people can be all three, and some people maybe can be two of the three. And so that's the traditional chief executive officer. So that's the person who knows how to operate. Then you have the chief engineer officer. So if you're in innovation and doing software, I think you have that technical background. And then the part where I play in our team is chief evangelist officer. So the person who has the storytelling, the vision, who can play the marketing. And I am very reliant on my chief executive officer, our COO, on paying taxes, paying the bills, asking him if I can do something. Like, that's how structured our roles are. But I would say, to me, what's really big to get to revenue is, to me, revenue symbolizes freedom. And if you have your expenses lower than your revenue, you just have the freedom to be agile. You may not grow really fast, but you have the freedom to be the tortoise in the race. And when you have, like, a lot of my competitors have raised $50 million, but I feel like their operating system on how they're operating is way different than how our mission is operating. And as a social enterprise, we have this very big heart piece in what we do. And so the idea of cutting costs sometimes, or like not doing the full thing, if you fundraise or took money, you might have to break down that habit, because now you have a board member in the room who's there for money. You someone with a different attitude of what you're doing. And so that's, to me, like, I think the big piece. I held on to a job for a very long time before leaving. Like, I was not going to leave my job until the business could sustain me doing it. And I think that's kind of a part of it as well. A lot of us should be proud to have a job that can pay for us to dream on the stuff at the end, and that 5 to 10 time until it can make that traction.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I really do think that, there's this level of, like, we want to know enough about this so that we can comfortably talk about money, comfortably talk about revenue, share these experiences with each other as business owners, but not get so mired in it that we lose that social impact side of our business. So Vanessa, I want to talk to you a little bit, because it looks a little different for you. You have a different business model because you sell products. And so there's merchandise, and there's a front end cost there. And there's a level of investment on your end before things actually end up on your revenue line.
Yes. And I have to say, like, EJ, I'm a little bit jealous of your team, because right now it feels like I have to wear those 3 hats, and really my strong suit is in one, right? But nevertheless, I have to know the financials. I mean, every day. And when I first started, I didn't really realize the extent to which that was going to be the case. I'm a big picture person. I'm the visionary. I can see 10 years down the road, and I can put in the plan to get there. And I want to move down the ball down the field to win the game. I don't want to be calling every little play, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but I have to do that. And part of doing that, part of winning the game, is also seeing, like, the step by step. And I guess the analogy that I would use is, I just hiked Kilimanjaro, and as I was hiking Kilimanjaro, I came back with, like, the biggest lesson, I guess, for me, or metaphor for me, was that, some days you could see the summit, like the mountain in the distance, really, really clearly. And you knew that you were going in that direction, and you're eventually going to reach there. Some days it was very, very shrouded in clouds, and you couldn't even really see it. But every day and every moment, you had to take the next step, right? Or else you're never going to get there. It doesn't matter if you can see the summit or not. You're never going to get there if you don't look down, like, just get your nose down and step and take the next step. And for me, being in the financials every day is like that, taking the next step, because like I will fall off the precipice. The whole company will fall off the precipice if I'm not paying attention to that next step. And, so at the end of the day, like, yeah, you can't spend more than you're taking in, or else the company will not succeed. And if the company does not succeed, all of the women I'm employing lose their jobs. Right. And so, I think that we have to find the balance between knowing that, basically knowing the why. So for me, being in the financials, knowing the financials intimately, the why is not to make a profit to enrich myself at the end of the day, right? The why is my profit is a means to an end. My end is not the profit. My end is just the means. And the end for me is more women enjoying more economic freedom and economic justice. So, that's why. That is why I have to pay attention to the financials at the end of the day. And it's hard to, like EJ was talking about, when you have the wrong kind of investor on your bus, and their why is the profit. That's where the misalignment can really cause some friction and some problems. And so finding people that are deeply aligned with your why, and understanding that profit for our kind of business is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself.
I really like that a lot, Vanessa. I think, whether it's one person at the top of an organization wearing all three hats, or a team of partners, having that why, understanding the values, we're never going to get there without that. But it's so easy. For me, I feel like money is the quickest way to distract myself from that why. Part of it may be the stress, right? Oh, you've got these debt repayments. We got to, I got to get the revenue right here. I got to make payroll, whatever it is. On the flip side, it could be positive emotion. It could be, oh man, it could be enriching myself. As much as I would like to say I'm not motivated by that, we all are to some extent, even if only for a few minutes while I'm alone at night working at my desk.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that positive emotion and that summit that Vanessa was just talking about, and that success, essentially, like the ability to look at your revenue and see what you can do with it. Like, what are the things that, maybe you personally or you as an organization have made where you're like, I feel really good about that, and we could not have done that if we didn't have the revenue to make that happen?
You strike a chord with me in the sense of, I see, revenue as a strategy in the sense of, I think it was Mark Cuban. Someone said something around like, sometimes the richest person in the world is the person who pays the least amount of bills at the beginning of the month. And I like what I tell a lot of, we work with students, and a lot of them come from poor areas. And, I grew up in a household that made $40,000 a year, and I never knew I was not like average or like, and so for me, but what I teach these kids is, how to live off of nothing. I mean, your peer who grew up in a house where they were making $250, them wanting to start their business, they're going to still think they got to live in their own apartment. They got to have a car. They got to do these things. And so a lot of how you leverage your revenue is a competitive advantage. What can you do less without? What can you leave more on the plate? A great example for us, we just sponsored the American School Counselor Association. It was Citibank, the Army, and our little company, the Student Success Agency. It was $50,000 to sponsor the American Counselor event. And all of our competitors come up to us like, man, you guys are doing so well. You are sponsoring the event. And I know that guy makes a lot more money than I do as a CEO. I'm willing to eat less so then I can stay on the competitive advantage. If he paid what I pay myself, he could also see his logo right up there. And I think that's a part of the revenue strategy as well, is when you get it, use it as a competitive advantage that, man, I could do something on 2 where most people it takes 4. And that's where I think you can start really inching up and getting some places.
For me, the biggest impact, the most rewarding impact is for the employees on our team, right? That's I get to see that impact every single day. And one of the things that I really love and cherish about being the size that we are as a company, we've got 18 people on our team, right? So I know everybody. You know, I know them as people. I don't want to lose that at some point, right? I got 10,000 employees. I can't know everybody. Somewhere between 18 and 10,000, you stop being able to recognize everyone in the hallway. And I really, as we continue to grow, the thing that I want to focus on is being able to invest that more into them. And that doesn't just mean compensation. You know, maybe it means, you know, if I've got a new mother on the team, how can we adjust and invest so that her job is still cohesive with her lifestyle versus trying to pivot and make it work for the bottom line. We had a couple of years ago, we had a team member whose husband passed away. I looked at the employee handbook that I wrote, and it said we give 2 days, I think 2 days bereavement. It's like, what? That's nonsense. You know, that's I couldn't believe what I was reading. I was like, that's not responsible. That's not ethical. That's not, I don't want to be a part of a company that's only going to give 2 days for a woman whose husband died. And I was talking to some friends who are business owners, and I said, I want to give months. Months is a minimum, right? If we're talking weeks, we're already in the wrong spot. And the response that I was consistently getting was, man, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of lost labor. And I just couldn't, I dreaded ever arriving at the place where that was my mindset. And so when I look at where I want the company to go and where I want to go as a business owner is to continue to raise our percentage of revenue that salaries represent. So like right now we're at 45. And for the type of business that we're in, I could look at that and say, hey, that's pretty good. I think it could be a lot better. And that's where I want to move to, is to be able to, I don't want to look at, a performance of you and say, I can't really promote you because, I'm still, to EJ's point, still making that Mercedes payment or whatever the hell. I want to be able to do what's right without having to worry about how that impacts me at all. And so to tie back to the first question, obviously I've got to have top line revenue at a place where that's even possible.
Yeah, we made a big audacious sort of move like that during the pandemic. We had a 10-year goal of being able to pay for our employee and their families' healthcare premiums. And, I was talking to other business owners and they were like, who does that? And I'm like, well, the U.S. Army does that. Granted, they pay us very little when we're privates, but they give us medical care.
Yeah.
And so being a military family, both a dependent when my father was in the Air Force, but then also being in the military myself and Michael being in the military, like it was something that we were used to. And then we got into the civilian world and we were like, oh my gosh, healthcare is really expensive. And so as business owners, we wanted to be able to provide that. Like it's a stress factor to not be able to have healthcare. And so that is a decision that because of the revenue that we were able to have in 2020 and some of the grants that we actually got from the city, we were able to make that decision like, oh my gosh, there is a decent plan here that we can actually do this. Like we can make it happen now because we were in the middle of a health crisis. And so what time better than then to actually make that decision, since it was already an audacious goal of ours. It was something we were already striving for. But now it's a matter of, okay, well, we don't want to take that away. So we know that we have to continue to maintain and sustain that benefit. It's something that's really important to us. It aligns with our values. And so we have to make that revenue to be able to maintain that and sustain that, even if healthcare prices go up. So it's something we're always.
What did you notice? I remember when you told me about that, and I was like, I was so excited. And at the same time, I was like, I got to get there. I got to get to that place that Cheryl's at. But did you notice that when you talk to other people, like, how did they react to that?
Other than saying like you said, that's a lot of money. Like,
yeah, like you're crazy.
Who does that? Like as an owner, that's extra distribution. that you could be getting,
Yeah.
but it comes down to, it was important enough to us. Like, we have been there where we have struggled to pay for healthcare. It's just, I can't imagine having a child and not having healthcare because of the cost of having a baby. Like,
Yeah.
I would probably have my child at home and have lots of complications because of the cost of having a child. Like, there are other things. I can't imagine getting COVID and being afraid to go to the hospital because I can't afford the bills, or going anyway and then having these bills just plague me for years. And the situation that puts me in, like, we have been there where we've had medical bills piled on medical bills. And I know some healthcare professionals really well because I called the hospital every day. Like, how do I reduce this? I'm the negotiator of, like, how can I reduce this bill? If I pay in full today, can I get 20% off? I don't want my team to ever be there. So it felt so exciting. And so there are a lot of reactions of, very few employers do that. Really, only big employers can do that. And they don't do it because it costs so much, because they have so many employees. And so it was a big surprise, but we have a team of 8 and we're capable of doing that. And again, it's looking at our team and looking at our revenue and looking at what we're going to project for future years. We want to maintain that, whatever we have to do to maintain that, because it's that important to us.
I think to EJ's point, if you're willing to eat less, you can invest, right? If you're willing to eat less, then there's so much like that you can do. And the optimist in me thinks that moving forward, that's going to be recognized as a competitive advantage for recruiting, for retaining top talent. It has to be. And I think it starts at the small, I think it starts with small companies, and we can have a lot of pressure upward into larger corporations, whether it's pay, whether it's benefits, time off policies, whatever it is. I think it starts with people like you doing that.
Well, let's talk more about that, the investment. So we make a lot of investments in our company and in our team, but then we also make personal investments, and some of the choices that we make personally have kind of trickled into what we do as a company also. I'm going to pass this one over to Vanessa, because I know she invests in her team a lot, and I'd love for our audience to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, listening to what you guys just said, one thing really stuck out that was a common theme across everything all 3 of you were saying, which is that you as the leader are willing to take more, or willing to take less to give your team more. And that therein lies, I think, the problem with unfettered capitalist greed. If we saw more business leaders like this panel and others like us who put a stake in the ground and said, look, like, the number 1 paid individual in the company should never make X percentage more than the lowest person paid in the company, right? That this person's end of year bonus should never be X percent greater than this person's end of year bonus. Like, if we started to have those kinds of conversations and those kinds of people who were willing to be this type of servant leader that takes less so that others can have more, then I think that's the only way that we'll start to really see real change made through businesses, through the private sector. And that's where the direction I think we should go. I mean, I'm really, really, really proud of the fact that we pay our employees' health insurance premiums, both in India and in the US as a startup. And that was something that when we started up, it was like, well, we get to decide what the policies are. And so we're doing this. And yeah, people are going to think we're insane, and we probably are, but I know that this is right. And I don't believe that we're going to, at the end of the day, I think that right wins. I just do. And so I'm going to put that stake and keep doing that. We didn't lay anybody off during COVID, even though our employees in India experienced a combined 5-month lockdown and were unable to produce anything, even go to the office at all, for a combined 5 months over the course of the last 2 years. So almost a quarter of the last 2 years. And yet we paid their wages during that. Is that like what, quote unquote, smart businesses do? No, but smart businesses also are employing women that moved out of the brothels and would literally be destitute if we weren't paying their wages any longer. So I'm really proud of those things. And we invest in our employees in a lot of ways, because that's the whole reason we exist. Like, the whole reason Savera exists is for the people that we employ. And we view them not just as workers. We view them not just as employees. They are human beings. And as human beings, they have a holistic nature, right? They have physical needs, intellectual needs, economic needs, and spiritual needs. And as an employer, we're not only there to meet their economic need, we want to create a culture, an environment where they can thrive in all of those areas and in all of those different ways. And so we created what we call our human flourishing model, that we employ with our employees, but that also is a human flourishing model. So it applies to me just as much as it applies to anybody else, and it's called PIES: physical, intellectual, economic, and spiritual flourishing. And we just look at ways as a company to make sure that we are investing in our employees as holistic human beings and not just as workers, because, and again, I'll say, just in an unfettered capitalist economy, you think it's tempting to think of people instrumentally. What can you do for me? And that's not how I want to view our employees. It's not about what you can do for me. It's about what we can do together and for each other, and not just in Savera, but then extending out into the world and into the broader community. So
thank you for that. Yeah. And so reinvesting into our business is one part of that, but I am going to assume, and you can answer, that, it's also changed your mind and how you invest in yourself and how you shop, how you choose suppliers, how you do everything in your life. I mean, I know it has for me. Being a social enterprise has changed a lot of my decisions, and I've made personal choices, and personal shopping choices, even like what I buy during the holidays, are purchased from other social enterprises and sustainable businesses. So is that the case with you? I mean, has it changed since you started Savera? Maybe you were always looking at that through that lens.
Yeah. So, I came to business ownership, as it were, like through a very unconventional path. So I was formerly a professor of political science, and all of my research and teaching and whatever for years had been on the issue of human trafficking. And so because of that, and just, also political economy and stuff, I've been thinking about these issues of conscious consumerism and conscious capitalism for a very long time. And I had, so I definitely was coming to my business with a lot of thoughts already formed on what I thought about, the ways that business could be a force for good, and how I, as not only a business owner, but also a consumer myself, can facilitate a better world and a better economy. So I don't think that the business, I think my thoughts on that have formed the business that I've created, rather than the business changing the way I think. But I do feel like we have a responsibility to continue educating consumers and business owners about how real this is. And when we talk about societal change, like, society is nothing more than a compilation of a lot of individuals, right? And so in order to make social change, individuals have to make individual decisions towards the future that they want to see. And then when we do that collectively, it creates social change. And so, yeah, I had a lot of thoughts about this before I started Severa, but for sure, like, I mean, I could tell you all the ways that I'm annoyingly so, and my kids will tell you annoyingly so. They want to go shopping and I'm like, no, you don't need that, it's just stuff, you know. Like, Mom, why do you always want to shop secondhand, you know? So yeah,
I'm right there with you. All right, Sanger, without giving us any stock market tips, where do you choose to invest?
I think there's an underlying theme in everything that we've talked about, which is that the decisions that we make day to day have to align with our values, right? Whether it's the decision to pay for health insurance, the decision to give out raises, the decision to sponsor a certain event, whatever it is, has to align with our values. And if it doesn't, we're going to feel unfulfilled. Sometimes we might not even understand why we feel that way. When it comes to investments, you know, whether it's an investment of energy, an investment of time, or an investment of capital, right, that is still a decision that still needs to be aligned to our values. So I can tell just by talking, you know, for 45 minutes that we have similar values, right? They're not identical. Our values are not identical. So the investments that we make can't be, broadly speaking, generally aligned with our values. They have to be precisely aligned with those values. When it comes to investing our capital, I'm actually very optimistic with a lot of the things that we've said. You know, Vanessa, you were talking about capitalist greed is going to hold back the average American or the average person from getting a lot of the benefits that we've talked about today. I'm actually really optimistic. So what we're seeing is that large financials are evaluating the sustainability of different publicly traded companies, and it's having a real impact. So for example, in the coal space, demand for coal has increased from 2020 to 2021. Obviously, a lot of that is the result of lockdowns being lifted and things like that. So demand has increased. Credit score, credit worthiness increased. Still, there's not a single publicly traded coal mining company that is listed as investment grade. That's insane. That's unheard of. So these companies are now having to go alternative routes to get access to capital. It's making it really difficult for them to do business. Now, whether or not you should invest in a coal company, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that by each of us individually aligning our investments with our values, we are having an impact. We are having an impact, and it's making it very difficult to be a bad actor. It's making it difficult to get access to capital. And so that extends not just to the environmental issues that we're dealing with, it extends to supply chain transparency, it extends to gender equity, it extends very far. And so on one hand, you know, I look at that and say, hey, as someone who can see myself in these values, I want to make sure that I'm aligning my capital. I see that even if you're a cynic, even if you don't have any of the values that we've talked about today, you better at least be paying attention to the risk of companies that are not aligned with those values. And so I think that that's what makes me really optimistic, is that even the cynic, even the person who isn't on this call today, isn't even listening to us, is going to have to get on board at some point.
Yeah, I'd like to just figure out, like, how do we start that conversation? And any of you can answer this question, because I have a hard time talking about money. I grew up in one of those households where you do not talk about money. It's a very recent thing for me, just I guess 2 years, 3 years since I joined Entrepreneurs Organization, that I was like, oh my gosh, people talk about money all the time in certain settings and certain groups. This feels weird. And so I'm still not like comfortable having conversation, even about a little bit of money, even about personal finances, like in my own home. It's still an uncomfortable conversation for me. How do y'all start those conversations? If you have any tips, you know, please share.
So I asked some version of the same question to every client, every prospective client that I talk to. Right? We sit down in my office, talking, maybe they're considering hiring our team, I'll ask them this question. And what's important about money to you? And now you don't have to answer right now, but I'll ask that question and rephrase that and re-ask that same question about 7 times before I get the answer. Right? Most of the time, what's important about money to you? I want to get better returns. What's important about that? So I can have more money. What's important about having more money? So I can retire. What's important about having enough money that you can retire, et cetera. And it can go all the way to the end before someone realizes it's important that I have the stability in my life to be able to provide for my children in the same way that my parents provided for me before they died. Wow, okay, now we're really somewhere. I say that to say that most people don't even know. They don't even know what's important about money. So judging yourself and saying, oh, I'm not very good at talking about this. Well, you might not even know yourself, and that's okay, right? I do this every day. I get the benefit of having that conversation. I think it's about practicing that conversation first with myself. And then I can talk to my friends about money. I can talk to my children about money. I can talk to my partners about money, my employees about money, whatever it is. So I encourage people to start internally. What are those? If you don't know your values and you don't know why money is even important to you in the first place, because it is to everybody, then we're never going to have a good conversation.
Yeah. Does anybody want to add to that?
The only thing I would say, and I don't know, this comes to mind because, as a person who has studied human trafficking for 15 years and both labor trafficking and sex trafficking, but a lot of sex trafficking and a lot of sex talk, right? Like I am the conversations around sex and pornography are completely normalized in my world. And so I think it's the same thing about money. I think that the more you talk about it, the more normalized it becomes, the less taboo it becomes, the more you talk about it, right? And it's like bad things are held in secret. And so when you don't talk about money, it's like it's something bad, or you're doing something bad, or and I think that we need to have more transparency about the things that we know matter in our lives. And, money itself is values neutral. It's like, it just is. It's a noun. It just is, but our attitude towards it and what we do with it, how we spend it, how we save it, those are not values neutral, and so we have to talk. And because of that, it matters. Like, because of the fact that it's part of our lives and what we do with it and our attitudes towards it, like it's a reflection of our values. Because of that, we have to talk about it and we have to be transparent. And as businesses, I'm a very strong believer in transparency and accountability. And I think that if the 2008 financial crisis showed us absolutely nothing, at least the one little thing you could maybe walk away with is that we all should be accountable for for our actions as executives and as professionals, and that our actions don't happen in a vacuum. They impact scores of people beyond us, and so we got to talk about it. We got to be transparent. We got to be willing to be transparent so that we can be held accountable and remain humble. None of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes when it comes to money and how we manage it and navigate it with our business. But if we don't talk about it, then it gets hidden. And then the things that are hidden fester and become big problems that affect more than just us in the long term.
I would feel, go ahead.
And I might go way the wrong way if you have a direction to go here. I'm inspired by both of you guys, by the way. It's super awesome to hear your guys' story and philosophy. That's where I was going to go. I really do hate money. Like, I do everything in my power to not think about money and to think about vision and the long term. I invest my entire life around it. Me and my wife have one car. I live in Eastside Fort Worth. I do everything in my human power to think about the long term. And I think when you're first starting out as a CEO, you got to think about the short term. But you're really in a fine spot when the things you wake up about is all long term. And I think why social entrepreneurs should one day run the world and become billionaires is because I think, a lot of social entrepreneurship is about the consumer side, which everything Vanessa said and Sanger said, I was like, man, I'm just elevated right now. But it's like I think a lot of social entrepreneurship is about like the sustainable. But I think there's a social entrepreneurship piece where I play in student success agency around the responsibility to do innovations in places that are not fast, lucrative, or like going to make you a lot of money. My customer is government. I hire tutors and humans to text kids, not chatbots, real humans to connect with kids. When I go to an investor and they ask, who's your client? The government. Who's your client? Poor schools. Why do you use humans? Why don't you use a chatbot? Because students need digital connection, and so like all these things don't sound like a good business. But I believe it's not a good business to them because they're 65 and they need to make an investment in 7 years to get to the LPs. I'm doing this for 30 years. And so I think when you can have a legacy design as a social entrepreneur, which means is what are you going to spend what are you going to spend your hours doing so that when you die, the design of the world is better. Nobody knows who invented the stoplight. Nobody knows who invented the toilet. But every single day we wake up and we stop. We use the restroom. These people made the world a better place. And so if you're someone who believes that we impact human evolution right now and like what we build, that's another form of social entrepreneurship. And having a long-term ethos allows you to position your entire life to really focus on such a hard thing when it really becomes easy to start salivating over short-term gains.
And that is so important. I just saw Muhammad Yunus speak, and he's, for me, like, I was so excited to hear him speak. He like coined the term social enterprise, and his founding of Grameen Bank, like when Danone, I think it was Danone that came to him and said, we want to get involved, we want to join in, we want to invest in this, and he said, there's no money in this. It's a social impact business. there's no money. We just be clear, there's no money. This is a bank, but there's no money in this. And but it's been years, decades now. There's plenty of money in Grameen Bank now. It has grown. It's like globally known. And this movement has grown, and there are large businesses now that actually are sustainable social impact businesses. And so I don't think that, the margins, like you said, if you're in this for the long haul and you're in it for the right reasons, it's okay that the margins are smaller sometimes.
Yeah. And just like, man, both of y'all were just, all of you were just hitting like so much of the piece of how much of just like, there's so much innovation in medical. There's so much innovation in finance, all these hard government ran things, but no true startup would want to go into them because it's slow, it's ugly, it's not but if you're a good person and you really want to change the world, I think there's so much space for us to innovate.
That's something that really struck me, EJ, about, you don't think about money, you try to live a life where you're not thinking about money. And I would argue, having never talked to you before about your money, that you are only able to do that because you front loaded all the thinking about money, right? You said, what are the values? Okay, my values are, I want to make sure that this company is able to have the impact that I want it to have and whatever vision you outline. And you constructed your life financially in a way to make that happen so that you don't have to day-to-day worry about it. You don't have to go out to dinner and count the appetizer, this and that. No, it doesn't matter. You're not worried month to month about whether your personal finances are going to disrupt the company's finances. And I think that that's something that is equally as important as what we have talked about so far today, is being able to have that impact starts with us, right? It starts with us managing our money appropriately. Because if I'm worried about how I'm going to pay my credit card bill, then there's no way I can do right by my employees. There's no way I can do right by my clients. there's no chance, right? I've now opened the door for me to corrupt, have money corrupt my thinking in the day decisions. So I would say that you actually did think very about it.
So yeah, a little bit is I'm a journalism major, and I was not a business person. I went to go do education. And I think a lot of times, and I could be really wrong on this, I've been thinking about what Vanessa talks about. I'm like that. I hate capitalism. I'm like, I'm going to just I think people think I'm changing education. I'm like, nah, we're changing capitalism, people. You ain't even ready. And so it's like, I think in that lane, but I think I start thinking about like, what's the problem? I think most people also aren't good at they're artists. I think most people are artists. And a lot of art and creativity is about like not maximization. It's a lot about like free flowing and allow the magic to happen, right? Like this is like why I just think that's such a big piece. And I feel like a lot of times what happens to our kids is like we ask them what they want to do, and all of our like social entrepreneurship kids go to like education, medical, military, because they think business is like, oh, I don't want money. Like, I don't want to, like, it's not about me making money. And so then all of our like, more competitive and like more competitive group goes to business college. And then we all become social workers and teachers and, grind 80 hours a week, making $50,000 an hour. And we're upset at the world because the other people made the decision to live in the stack of capitalism. And so I'm so passionate, if you're a teacher, social worker, to think yourself as an entrepreneur. You can do exactly the impact you're making in an exponential way. Your heart is what capitalism needs.
Yeah, I will say, I will disagree with you just a little. I'll contradict and say, when I discovered conscious capitalism, I started to love it. I started to recognize that there was a way to make a difference. This thing that Sanger is talking about where, it's bottom up, we're going to force the bad actors out at this point. I think that I have started to love capitalism in that sphere. I also, when y'all were talking about transparency, I guess I do talk about money comfortably, but it's more in like our impact reports and what we're doing with that money. So I guess I'm not completely opposed to the conversation. But this is why I hosted this, is because I want to open that door. I want to open the door for people to ask questions about this, for them to hear the different ways that we talk about it. But also like, feel free to contact me. Like I want to have these conversations. I want to understand how people are investing. Because every time I have a panel like this, or I speak to somebody new, I learn the different things that I can do. Like I didn't start as an owner knowing all the things that I wanted to change about the business. Every day I'm learning something new and I'm changing something new. The thing you said about bereavement leave, Sanger, we offer 3 days. And now I'm thinking like, should we change that? I don't know yet, because that does have an impact, right? That has an impact on the business. It has an impact on the revenue. And, we've made other decisions and invested in other places. And I don't know, but every time I have these conversations, it opens a door for me to learn something new and to see a perspective that maybe I didn't see before. So I just want to thank you all for joining me today. This is an excellent conversation. We have recorded it, so it will go live so that we can share it with those who weren't able to join us. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything y'all want to close with, or give any shout outs or anything to our audience?
Great conversation. I would love to continue it over a glass of wine at some point. Love it. I have so much more to say about capitalism and the word capital, and like how social capital and human capital and, environmental capital, it all is about creating wealth, but different kinds of wealth. So anyway, I would just love to have these conversations and continue them with you guys and talk more about money, the taboo topic that nobody wants to talk about.
We're going to be the trendsetters. We'll talk about money all the time.
Money, like Vanessa said, it's a tool. It can't be inherently good or bad. What's good or bad about it is what we ascribe to it and how we use it, just like any other tool. So I think that, the one big takeaway that I have from this conversation is that all we've got to do is get better at using the tool. That's it. In order to maximize the impact that I'm going to have as an individual, that my business is going to have, and if anybody is listening to this who isn't an entrepreneur, business leader, CEO, whatever you're thinking, I'm just some guy, I'm working at a desk, I don't even have any money right now. Doesn't matter. Your money is still a tool to impact the world and to extend your values out into the world. And I think I agree with EJ or with you, Vanessa. I would talk about this all day long.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I feel honored to have met you people, because it feels such a lonely road when you have such a big a heart. I think my relationship with capitalism is, I believe it's what allows you to be exponential in your life. But at the same time, it's not started at the same place. And that is real. I will say that stat again. And I say that, you want to talk about someone who starts a conversation? I say that comment every single time. $1.7 million to be the top 10% of wealth in America if you're white. If $380,000 if you're black, right? If you're white and you dropped out of college and you're leading your household, you have more net worth than a black college graduate. These things are real. And so when you hear this is why I'm so passionate about black and brown people starting businesses and being exponential, because no one's going to give it to you and no one's going to come. And you have to know these numbers, and why talking about revenue and talking about money is so important, because so many people they think, oh, I'm playing on the same golf course, I'm doing the same things, I'm taking vacations, we're equal now. It's not. And so talking about what's behind the curtain is important.
Equity is a whole different conversation, and it's an important one. That's the next panel we'll do. Thank you all for your time today.